Aurora, and I'm here with you all today to share my thoughts on gun violence. I believe that we need to do something about America's gun problem, particularly in the form of more gun control. 33,000 people are killed by firearms every year, and this problem is unique to the US. Americans have an unhealthy obsession with guns, so much so that we are 4.4% of the world's population, yet we have half of all civilian-owned guns in the world. The first category of death I'd like to speak about is homicide. 1/3 of all gun deaths in the US are homicides. America has 6 times as many firearm homicides as Canada and 21 times more than Australia. While the public pays more attention to homicides, did you know that 2/3 of all gun deaths are actually suicides? Firearms are much more effective than, say, cutting or poison, and thus they are most people's weapon of choice. Let's look to the facts. Studies show that if it takes a longer time period to obtain a weapon, the impulse to commit suicide is likely to fade, or people will resort to more ineffective methods. Things like mandatory waiting periods and mental health checks would cause this. And it's proven that 90% of people who survive a suicide attempt won't ever attempt again. Also, guns have the ability to kill mass amounts of people in a short time. While you might have heard of a mass shooting every once in a while in the news, did you know that in the US, there have already been 284 mass shootings in 2017 alone? That's about 1 mass shooting every day. So, when I say I want more gun control, I mean 4 things. The first is mental health checks, meaning that if someone is medically proven to have a mental illness, they would not be allowed to own a gun. The second is that in order to own a gun, one must have a clean criminal record. It doesn't make logical sense to hand a lethal weapon to someone who used to break the law because there's a higher probability that they would use that gun in a violent way. These laws will reduce gun violence because in a study of 16 recent mass shootings, 8 gunmen had criminal records or documented mental health problems that did not prevent them from legally obtaining a weapon. Additionally, the third thing that we should do is have a limit on how many guns one should own. Stephen Paddock, the Las Vegas shooter, purchased 33 guns within a year before the shooting. This indicates an unhealthy obsession with guns and violence. Fourth is that we should have mandatory gun training. Why do we require teenagers to take driver's ed, pass a permit test, drive with their permit for 1 year, and then pass a final test before they can get their license? We do it because driving is dangerous, so why would guns be any different? Most objections to gun control stem from people quoting the Second Amendment. But the great thing about gun control is that you can still have your guns, as long as you aren't a criminal and you pass a training test. And for people who claim to be good guys with guns, this shouldn't be a problem. And gun control is proven to be effective. A meta-analysis of 130 different studies from 10 different countries proves that gun restrictions actually lower gun violence. Back to the topic of the Second Amendment. Guns have changed since the Second Amendment was written. In 1787, a musket could only fire 3 rounds per minute, while an AR-15 today can fire 45. Technology has changed, so our laws must change as well. Additionally, absolute freedom to do whatever you want is never a good thing. Governments function by having restrictions on freedom in the form of laws. We need gun control to save lives, and this should be our primary concern since being alive is a biological prerequisite to the freedom to own a gun. Additionally, there are 3 main positions on guns. There are people who want no regulation, people who want some regulation, and people who want a complete ban on guns. If you couldn't tell, I advocate for some regulation through gun control. No regulation on guns at all is absurd. If we are to even allow people to be in possession of such lethal killing machines, without a doubt there needs to be regulation. Otherwise, guns would get into the hands of the wrong people. Also, a ban wouldn't be the best idea, because even though it may have worked in other countries, America has a large presence of gun culture. People wouldn't be very willing to just give up all their guns. There would be a lot of resulting backlash, and it would thus become ineffective. The main problem with a ban on guns is that people would continue to use them underground and through the black market, but the situation would be even worse because there would be no gun registration, meaning that the government would have no idea which guns were where. Just because we have the right to bear arms doesn't mean that we should just stand by while innocent people are killed. Gun control allows us to preserve the liberties of good guys with guns, but it also allows us to keep these weapons from getting into the wrong hands. Sometimes, thoughts and prayers just don't cut it, and this is one of those times.